In this video, we're going to be taking a look at 4 different techniques to create a colorful, elegant logo reveal. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, my name's Shaul Gonsalves and this is Animation Deconstructed. Now, there's a lot of techniques to get into with this video, but you'll see that once we set everything up in this first step, everything will go pretty smoothly. So let's jump straight into After Effects. So inside After Effects, we're going to create a new composition, just coming down to the composition button. I'm going to call this logo anim 1 1920 by 1080p, 30 frames per second, and 10 seconds should be plenty. Going to press OK. Going to create a background, so right click, new solid. Doesn't matter what color this is, let's just call it BG. Press OK. Come over to the effects and presets, and if you can't see this, just select default. I've got small screen here because I'm just working with one screen. Going to type in gradient, come down to gradient ramp, double click that, change this linear ramp to radial ramp. Let's swap these colors, and if you want to follow along, I'm going to make this a blue gray, so 2C353E. Press OK, and I'm going to zoom out and just drop this down and drop this down as well. Now, something else, in my project panel I have this at 16 bits. Now if you hold Alt, you can cycle through these 8, 16 and 32. This will just help with some of the glows. Just that gamut will help us get a bit more color in this. Now, something else I have here is 2 logos. Just going to open this up, and this is just created straight in After Effects, some text and some graphics, and then I've got logo 2, which is just an illustrative file. Now I'll have a link in the description where you can get these files if you want to follow along. Otherwise, just use some logos which you have and just scale them something like this. So taking logo 1, drop that on the background. Let's scale this down, try 65%. That looks good. Now, before I actually start this animation, I want to point out that I do normally create a storyboard before I actually start animating. So I already know that the logo is going to fade in with some light streaks left to right over 2 seconds, and then it's going to hang for about a second or so, and then the light streaks will change this logo to another logo at the end. So in order to create the light streaks, I'm going to create some maps here. So let's create new solid. Let's change the color of this so that it's a bit different. It doesn't matter what color this is, but I am going to say this is the reveal map. Press OK. And then I'm going to go over to effects and presets and type in fractal. And you want to take this fractal noise and double click it. You want to change the soft linear to spline. So drop this complexity. 1 is perfect. I want this to also animate over the 2 seconds. So I'm going to turn on the stopwatch at 0, move over to 2 seconds and change that to 1 revolution. If I press U, you'll see we've got 2 keyframes. And if we scrub the timeline, you'll see there's just some subtle movement. Now I also want to fade this on and off. So I'm going to keyframe the brightness at 0. Let's take this down. I think at -100 should be good. Press U to see our keyframes. Move forward to the 2 seconds, and I'm going to take that up to 100, and we should have pure white. I'm just going to select those 2 brightness keyframes, press F9 to easy ease. I'm going to close that up. I'm going to create 2 more maps. So this next one, just solid, we're going to call this light streaks. Press OK, double click. Going to use fractal noise again, except this time we're going to use max as the fractal type, and we're going to use block, and this contrast and brightness should be okay. So I'm going to drop down the transform, untick the uniform scaling, and I'm going to scale up this width. Let's see what 900 looks like, and I just want to crunch it down on the height, so 50, maybe 45 looks pretty good. Now I want this evolution to constantly animate over time, and an easy way to do this, which I don't use much in my tutorials, is just to Alt click on the stopwatch and you'll see it'll go red in the timeline. Over here you can just start typing, and I'm going to say time and then star, which is multiply, and let's say 180 degrees, and then either click out or press enter on your numpad. Now what this is going to do is over every second that evolution is going to rotate 180 degrees, and you can see that over here. If we move to 2 seconds, that should be 1 revolution, and so on and so forth. The next thing I want to do is actually to animate the brightness. So let's turn that on at 0. I'm going to go back -108. At 1 second, I want to actually control exactly how much I see. So something like this. I've got 45. And then at 2 seconds, I want this to be at white. So I'm going to take this all the way up, and 98 seems to be fine. I'm going to select all these keyframes, press the F9 key to easy ease. And then we just need to make this a bit softer by adding a Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go into effects and presets, type in Gaussian, we'll double click that. I only want this to actually blur left and right, so I'm going to change the horizontal and vertical down to horizontal, and then take this up, let's say about 150, and that looks pretty good. I'm also going to just repeat the edges just to clean up those edges. Just scrubbing across, you can see what's happening here. So we've just got one more fractal layer to do. So new, solid, and let's call this liquid. And I'm going to press OK. And this will drive some particles. I just want to cut out a bit of the logo randomly. So let's add a fractal noise again. Let's take this contrast right up, say 400, and the brightness down. I want a lot of black in this. So minus 90. This is just going to help cut out really small pieces of the logo. Complexity, let's take that down to 1 and just change the scale slightly. So 85 maybe. Now we can hide all these layers and move on to the animation. So now that we've set up all our maps, let's actually create this light reveal. So we're going to select our logo layer, and then we're going to come over to effects and presets, and we will type in set space matte, and this effect will come up over here. What we're going to do is actually set the matte by pointing at one of these layers. So I'm going to point this at the light streaks, and you'll remember that we actually fade it on and off. Nothing will happen immediately, and that's because either we need to pre-compose these or actually just change the source to effects and masks. The more pre-compositions you have in your composition, the slower your rendering is going to be. So now we change alpha to luminescence. We can just scrub back. Next thing I want to do is come over to effects and presets and type in displace, and you want to choose this distort displacement map. Double click that. We're going to select the reveal map. I want to take off the vertical displacement. Only wanted to move left and right, and we're going to take this up quite a bit. So let's change source to effects and masks as well, and then you can see what's happening here as we drag this up. Let's say 150. Then I want to correct this by duplicating this and saying minus 150. This will take our logo back to the center, but still add more distortion. Then I'm going to duplicate this once more. Let's change this to the light streaks, and let's say maybe 300. Duplicate this and correct the position by making that minus 300, and then just scroll through this. And you can use this for your glitch animations, but what we're going to do is really soften this up later to become light streaks. Now I do want to actually change these to RGB, so I'm going to type in here tint. What I'm going to do is change the white to red. The reason I'm not using fill is because there is a gradient on my logo, so I want to keep that in there. I'm also going to change the normal to lighten. And then I'm going to duplicate this up, and we're just going to adjust some of these for each color. So changing this red, let's say this should be green. I'm going to copy this amount here, make that 0, go to green and paste it, press OK. And then let's just change some of these settings. Starting on the first displacement map, I'm going to make this, let's say 190, and then add some vertical displacement, 10, and then we'll do the opposites for this. So minus 190 and minus 10. 410 and minus 410. Duplicate this logo up. Let's rename these. So I'm going to say this is R, G, and let's call this B. Come down to the bottom. Let's change this to blue. Copy this out. 0, tab into the next one, paste, Control V, and we should have a blue. It's sitting on top of the other one, so you're not going to see it right now. So let's go pretty high here. Let's make this 290, and let's make that 5. Then minus 290 and minus 5, and pretty high here as well, 585 and minus 580 minus 5, and just give this a play. Okay, just taking a look here, one of my settings is wrong, so I'm going to the green layer, and I just need to make that minus 10 on the negative. There we go. And everything should come back into one position at 2 seconds. Let's add some glow to this. So I'm going to move back just slightly, right click, new adjustment layer. I'm going to go over to effects and presets, type in glow, double click that. Let's drag the threshold down, let's say about 33, and then take the radius right up and just type in something at 150. And let's change this layer as well to screen. This will just help affect the entire scene a bit more. And I also want to change the horizontal and vertical to just horizontal. And you can see this helps the effect of the light streaks. Let's duplicate this and just adjust a few more settings. Let's make this 66 and 120 maybe. looking pretty good. At 2 seconds, this needs to be off. So I'm going to move over to 2 seconds, press my T key for transparency or opacity. Take this down to 0 and let's move to, let's shift page up twice. So that's 20 frames backward. Let's take that up to 100 and just see how that looks. Okay, that looks pretty good. Next, I want to create some particles flying off the logo as it fades in, and then also create some guard rays from above shining down on the logo to bring something more magical to it. Now, another part of the effect that I want to get is as this is turning on, I want some particles to fly off, and this is done really easily. So in order to create the particles, I'm going to duplicate this logo and I'm going to turn off the color. Let's actually get rid of all these displacement maps and the tint. Just solo this for a moment, and I'm going to change this set map to that liquid, and you can see that now we just have little spots of this logo. And with this, I'm actually going to break this up into particles, and the easiest way to do this is let's just grow the bounds. As you can see, our layer is smaller now, so our particles would actually end at the edge of this. So just type in grow bounds and take this up. I'm just going to make a random number, 800 pixels, and then type in pixel poly and find the CC pixel poly. Now you can see the particles go straight down. So I'm going to take the gravity almost off, so 0.02. I like just a little bit of gravity. Let's change the force to half of that, so 50. And then in order to change the angle of the way this is going to fly off, I'm going to zoom out, and then somewhere in here you'll find the source center. We can just drag it back. If we move forward, you can see where these are flying off to. The further you go, the less of an angle these particles are going to have. Let me stop about there, and I'm going to change the direction randomness, say 25, and the speed randomness 90. That's leaving a nice amount of particles on the screen. And the grid spacing, let's make these way smaller. So let's say 8. Only thing we need to do is move this forward because these are going to start right away. So I think at about this point here we can have this. So I'm going to change the color of this just so I know which one it is. Just move this forward. Let's rename this logo particles. The next thing I want to do is actually add some light rays from the top of the screen, and the easiest way to do this is actually with an adjustment layer. So I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. Let's rename this to light rays, and the power of this is that whatever happens in your scene, all the colors and everything else that you actually change, this will light the scene with the exact same colors without having to have any kind of CC toner or any kind of fills for you to adjust. So let's add a transform, and then I'm going to take this position, make sure that you don't drag the anchor point. So clicking on this, we'll move to about here, almost at the top, and you'll see that this actually changes our logo. I'm going to change the mode of this to screen, and then I'm going to press the T key for opacity and just take this down to, let's say, about 85. We'll correct all this at the bottom in just a moment, but I first want to just create these light rays. I also just want to scale this, take off uniform scaling, and change this height to about 80. Still just squash it slightly so we can get a bit of a denser ray. Then going to add a levels, coming over here, and let's just crunch these colors down about there. Can twirl that up just to neaten it up, and we're going to add a radial fast blur. So let's actually take the CC radial fast blur. Let's take this point and just move it slightly above, maybe something like this, and take this up to almost 100. Let's say 97. It's going to move backwards in the timeline to see how this is looking with the colors. You can see that we're getting quite a lot of color in that. Let's add a Gaussian blur just to soften it a bit more, and I'm going to make this 200. Let's add a curves adjustment, just seeing too much brightness on this, so we can just easily darken this just by crunching this right at the bottom here, just by pulling across. You can see it's almost like a spotlight now. And then if I turn on my transparency grid, you can see the issue that we have. An easy way to fix this is just by coming over to the effects and presets panel, type in solid, and you'll see solid composite. Just double click that, change the white to black, and we should be back to where we started. Let's add a new layer, which is a glow layer. So adjustment layer, let's rename this, enter, or glow 2. I want to move to where this is at 2 seconds. Type in glow, add a glow. Let's adjust this slightly. I don't want it to be additive, it's just brightening out everything too much. So let's change it to screen. Let's take this up slightly, maybe 68. going to take the glow intensity down to 0.3 and the glow radius, let's take this up to 55 and then duplicate this. Really take this up, let's say 280 maybe, and 0.5. We'll do a final color correction at the end. Okay, so let's start cleaning up this effect quickly. Need just a few more adjustments on this. I'm going to soften this whole thing. So layer, new adjustment layer. It's called the softer. Add a Gaussian blur. I'm going to make this 300 and that's plenty there. And the way I'm going to actually use this is just by taking down the opacity. So press the T key. And let's make this 25. Okay, that's still pretty high. Let's go half of that, so 12.5. That's a bit better. And then I just want to add a curves adjustment to this. So layer, new adjustment layer, curves. We're just going to do a simple, let's type in curves here, a simple S curve, just by bringing this down over here and pushing this up at the top. And everything seems to be coming together pretty well. Check the transparency grid. Okay, because of the glows and the blurs, now got issues there. So solid composite again, change that to black. Then let's bring out some more colors by adding some vibrance. Going to make this 55 and 20. Start getting these blues and everything else. And if we come back here, these will really shine those colors out really nicely. In this last piece, we're going to be transitioning from the first logo to the second logo, and this is really easy because everything's set up. And then we're going to just get rid of the banding, which you might see in your composition with the gradients. So to get our second logo, I'm first going to come over to the logo anim 1. Let's duplicate that up. And I'm just going to solo these 3 layers here, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to duplicate just one more up and turn that off for now. But I want to swap all of these out for my second logo. Move over to 2 seconds. I'm going to change this top one. Let's just turn it on, take off the lighter color, leave it as normal. And we need to just take the tint off this so it's yellow. I'm going to press the T key for opacity, turn on at 2 seconds, move back to about 1 second and turn it off. Now we can close that down, close our logos down, go back to logo animation 1, and I'm going to take that animation 2 and let's say we'll have this logo stay for about a second. Then at 3 seconds we're going to have this logo 2 animation come in. So I want to bring this in just above. This way all the glows are going to apply to this. I'm also going to collapse transformations just by turning this little button on over here, and this way with all this lighten and screens and everything, it's going to apply inside here in this composition. And now we just need to actually turn our light rays back. We go to our light streaks and we press U, can add a keyframe here, and if we remember what's happening here, it is pure white at the moment. So at about 5 seconds, I want this to be pure black. So I'm just copying that first frame over there, and we should have, that looks pretty good. Going to turn that off, and you'll see the logo behind is actually starting to get distorted again. And we just need to turn our glow layer on, press U. We see that we turned it off earlier at 3 seconds. Add a keyframe, shift page up 10 frames forward and take that up to 100. And then at about 4:15, add a keyframe, go to 5 seconds, and we can turn it off. Now the last thing I want to do is just clean up the banding on this. Then we'll do one final preview. If you ever have this issue, just follow these 3 effects, which I'll do now. I'm just going to add a new adjustment layer. Just say fix. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur. I'm going to add a sharpen, and I'm going to add a noise. And the last thing I'm going to do is add a transform just to fix anything that happens. So the Gaussian blur, let's take this up really slightly. Blurriness to about 0.3. We'll fix that blurriness with a sharpen of 25. And then the noise, let's just add slight amount of noise, let's say 2, and the banding on that should disappear. One thing that you will notice is right at the top here, you'll see a pixel that appears. That's why I added the transform. Let's just make this a 100.5. It's not much of a change, and that will be the entire animation. I'm going to just do one final preview. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, take a look at either of the videos coming up on screen right now. Keep animating, and until next time.